This last batch. Okay. Use the given point on the terminal side to find all 6 trig functions. So let's see, I'm going to have to find sine of theta, cosine of theta, tangent of theta. Let's see, cosecant, CSC, secant, and cotangent. So I got to make a triangle. Most of you figured out that you got to make a triangle. And when you make your triangle, keep it orientated the same. You've got a right angle on the top right. Keep the right angle on the top right. The theta value always has to be closest to the origin. Is the lower angle closer to the origin or the upper angle? The upper angle. So that has to be my theta value. And they tell me 2 is my x value. And 2 radical 3, I'm going to ignore the negative sign right now, but I'll get to it in a minute. How do I find the third side? Pythagorean theorem. 2 squared plus 2 radical 3 squared is c squared. So 4 plus, remember I have to square the 2 and the radical 3. 4 times, let's see, radical 3 squared is 3. So 4 plus 12 is c squared. 16 is c squared. So what does c equal? 4. So I'm going to label these. 2 radical 3 would be my opposite. 2 is my adjacent. 4 is my hypotenuse. And before I get started, this is a 4th quadrant angle. And if I look back up here, all students take calculus. In the 4th quadrant, only cosine is positive, which means that cosine and secant will be positive. Sine, cosecant, tangent, and cotangent are going to be negative. My hypotenuse, I need to label that. That's worth a point. So what I just figured out using the Pythagorean theorem, I need to put that 4 there. Now, sine is going to be opposite over hypotenuse. Does that reduce? Sure does. That gives me radical 3 over 2. Cosecant, I need to flip that. That would be 2 over radical 3. Multiply by your rad 3 over rad 3. That gives you 2 radical 3 over 3. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. Does that reduce? To what? 1/2. If I flip 1/2, I get a secant value of 2. And then tangent is opposite over adjacent, so that would be 2 radical 3 over 2. Those cancel, so I have radical 3. Again, the negative's already there. And then cotangent, I need to flip radical 3. Well, isn't that radical 3 over 1? So if I flip it, that becomes 1 over radical 3. Multiply by your rad 3 over rad 3. And I get radical 3 over 3 is my cotangent. Those were worth 2 points each blank, for a total of 12 for the chart and another point for your hypotenuse. That's where the 13 points comes from. Okay. 18 and 19 make you think a little bit backwards. Name 2 angles in radians that both have a cosine of negative radical 2 over 2. Cosine is x, correct? So I'm going to go look at my unit circle and find 2 angles that have a cosine or an x value of negative radical 2 over 2. So if I look here, the only 2 angles that have a negative radical 2 over 2 are 135 degrees and 225. On this side in quadrants 1 and 4, it's positive, isn't it? So I need to label those angles in radians. So I'm going to say 3 pi over 4 and 5 pi over 4. Those are my 2 angles. Name 2 angles in degrees that both have a tangent that is 0. Tangent is sine over cosine or y over x. So in other words, I need to find ones that have a y value that is 0. What are two angles that have a y value of 0? You could either use 0, 180, or 360. You could use any combination of two of those. So you could do 0 degrees and 180 degrees. You could use 180 degrees and 360 degrees. Any combination of those three, but again, please label it in degrees. And over here, please make sure you're in radians. Okay? Now, something I didn't tell you before, but I actually counted number 20 as extra credit. It is not on your test. Number 20 is not on your test. But I do want to show you how to do it just because it's a quick problem. So, between pi over 2 and pi, that tells me we're talking about quadrant 2. And with our all students take calculus, quadrant 2 has sign being positive, which means my tangent value is going to be negative. I need to use that rule that says sine squared of theta plus cosine squared of theta equals 1. And if they give me cosine theta, I'm going to put in negative 0.8830 squared equals 1. Well, I can go ahead and take this, square it, and subtract it from 1. And that leaves me with sine squared theta equals 0.220311, etc. Square root both of those, and I get sine of theta equal to 0.469. So that's what I put in there. If you got that right, you got 2 extra credit points. To find tangent then, we know tangent of theta would be equal to sine of theta over cosine of theta. So that means I take the sine value I just found and I divide it by the cosine value they gave me. That's a negative 8830, and you end up with negative 0.532. And again, that was also worth 2 points. So if you got both of those, you got 4 points of extra credit. Okay, so again, I'm going to post these on School Loop. I'm sorry, I'm going to post them on